Picture this. You're standing at the edge of something extraordinary. The job you've dreamed about, the relationship you've longed for, the raise you know you deserve, the life you keep imagining late at night when the world goes quiet. It's all right there, close enough to touch. But there's a wall between you and everything you want. And here's the thing that might shake you to your core. That wall, it's not money, it's not talent, it's not connections or timing or luck. It's silence, your silence. The words you never said, the question you never asked, the request you swallowed because something inside you whispered, don't. They'll say no. You'll look desperate. You're not enough. What if I told you that the single most powerful thing separating those who get what they want from those who don't isn't intelligence, isn't privilege, isn't even hard work? It's the willingness to open their mouth and ask. That's it. That's the whole secret hiding in plain sight. And right now, in this moment, you're about to learn how to use it. This isn't about begging. This isn't about manipulation or clever tricks or making people feel cornered. This is about something deeper, something braver, something fundamentally human. This is about reclaiming your voice, building a kind of confidence that doesn't crack under pressure, and learning an art form that will reshape every corner of your life, your career, your relationships, your sense of self. So, if you've ever stayed quiet when you should have spoken up, if you've ever watched someone else get what you wanted simply because they had the nerve to raise their hand, if you've ever gone home replaying the moment you almost asked but didn't, then this is for you. Every word, every chapter, every single lesson. Welcome to the art of requesting. How to unlock whatever you desire. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Invisible Chains. Why we stay silent. Let me ask you something honest. When was the last time you wanted something, truly wanted it, and didn't ask? Maybe it was a raise you'd earned 3 times over. Maybe it was help during the season when you were drowning but kept smiling. Maybe it was as simple as asking someone to stay. You're not alone. Most people walk through life carrying a quiet ache, the ache of unasked questions and unspoken needs. And the strangest part? They don't even realize they're doing it. It becomes so normal to stay silent that silence starts feeling like safety. But it's not safety. It's a cage, a comfortable, familiar, invisible cage. So why do we do this? Why do intelligent, capable, worthy human beings hold back from simply asking for what they need? The answer lives deeper than most people think. It's not laziness. It's not apathy. It's something that was planted inside you long before you were old enough to question it. It's psychology. Think back. Way back. Think about the kitchen table when you were 7 years old. Maybe you asked for something, a toy, attention, permission to speak, and you were met with a sharp, not now, or stop being so needy, or worse, silence. Cold, dismissive silence. Those moments, as small as they seem, carved pathways in your brain. They taught you a lesson you never consciously chose to learn. Asking is dangerous. Asking leads to pain. Asking means rejection, and rejection means something is wrong with you. Now fast forward 20, 30 years, you're sitting in a conference room and your boss asks if anyone has questions. Your hand stays down. You're at a dinner party and someone mentions an opportunity that's perfect for you. You smile and nod, but never follow up. You're lying next to someone you love, and there's something you desperately need to say, but the words dissolve before they reach your lips. Same pattern, same fear, different stage. Here's what psychologists have discovered, and this part is crucial. Our brains process social rejection in the same neural pathways that handle physical pain. Read that again. When someone dismisses your request, ignores your question, or turns you down, your brain literally registers it as if you've been physically wounded. That's not weakness. That's biology. Your nervous system is wired to protect you from the tribe casting you out. Because thousands of years ago, being rejected by your group meant death. But here's the paradox that changes everything. You're not on the savannah anymore. A no in a meeting room won't end your life. A declined request won't leave you stranded. In the wilderness, the danger your brain perceives is an echo, a ghost, a shadow from an ancient world that no longer exists. And yet, that shadow controls millions of lives every single day. Let's talk about what silence actually costs you. Because it's not free. Silence has a price tag, and it's steep. Every time you hold back from asking, you don't just miss an opportunity. You send a message to yourself. A quiet, devastating message that says, I'm not worthy of receiving. And every time you send that message, it gets louder. It becomes a belief, then a habit, then an identity. You start telling yourself stories. I'm just not the type of person who gets lucky. Good things happen to other people. They'd probably say no anyway, so what's the point? These aren't observations. They're prison walls built one silent moment at a time. I want you to imagine two neighbors living on the same street. Same education, same talent, same potential. One of them asks for feedback, asks for introductions, asks for opportunities, asks for support when times get hard. The other one waits, hopes, assumes that if they work hard enough, someone will eventually notice. 5 years later, their lives look completely different, not because one was smarter or luckier, but because one understood something the other didn't. The world doesn't hand out rewards to those who wait quietly in the corner. It responds to those who step forward and speak. Now here's the part that might surprise you. The people you admire, the ones who seem to effortlessly attract opportunities, promotions, relationships, even forgiveness, they're not fearless. They feel the same knot in their stomach. They hear the same inner critic whispering, "What if they say no?" The difference is what they do next. They ask anyway. They've learned to reframe rejection. Instead of treating a no as evidence of their unworthiness, they treat it as information. Maybe the timing was off. Maybe the approach needed adjusting. Maybe they simply asked the wrong person. But never, not once, do they conclude that they don't deserve to ask. This is the shift that separates those who receive from those who remain empty-handed. It's not about eliminating fear. It's about changing your relationship with it. Fear becomes a compass instead of a cage. It points toward the things that matter most, the asks that could genuinely transform your life. And that brings us to mindset, because the lens through which you see asking determines everything. There are two lenses. The first is the scarcity lens. Through this lens, opportunities are rare and precious. Every no feels catastrophic. Asking feels like begging, and rejection feels like a verdict on your entire existence. People who see through this lens ask once, maybe twice, and then retreat forever. The second is the abundance lens. Through this lens, opportunities are everywhere, flowing like rivers. A no is just a detour sign, not a dead end. Asking feels natural, like breathing, like reaching out your hand to someone who might just be waiting for you to reach. People who see through this lens ask again and again, not out of desperation, but out of deep, unshakable belief that the right yes is always on its way. Which lens are you looking through right now? Be honest with yourself, because you can change it. That's the beautiful thing about mindset. It's not fixed. It's not genetic. It's a choice you make every single morning. Here's a small exercise before we move on. Think about one thing you want right now. Something real. Something that matters to you. Now ask yourself, have I actually asked for it? Have I said the words out loud to a real person? If the answer is no, sit with that for a moment. Don't judge yourself. Just notice. That gap between wanting and asking, that's exactly what we're going to close together. Chapter 2. Asking is a craft, not a gift. There's a myth that floats around in our culture, subtle but destructive. It goes something like this. Some people are just natural askers. They were born confident, charismatic, bold. And the rest of us? We just have to accept our quieter, smaller role. This is a lie. A well-meaning, deeply damaging lie. Asking is not a personality trait. It's a craft. Like cooking, like writing, like playing an instrument or learning to drive a car. Nobody picks up a guitar for the first time and plays a symphony. Nobody sits behind the wheel at 16 and drives like a professional. Every skill starts awkward, clumsy, uncertain, and asking is no different. The people you watch walk into rooms and confidently make requests. The ones who seem to magnetically attract yes after yes, they weren't born that way. They practiced. They stumbled. They were rejected more times than you probably realize. They just kept going. So let's strip away the mystique and look at what effective asking actually looks like. Because there's a structure to it, a recipe, and once you understand the ingredients, you can use it anywhere, with anyone, in any situation. The first ingredient is clarity. You need to know exactly what you're asking for. Not vaguely, not generally, not something along the lines of. Exactly. There's an enormous difference between I'd like to grow in my career and I'd like to meet with you for 30 minutes this month to discuss how I can develop the skills needed for the senior analyst role. One is a wish floating in the wind. The other is a clear, actionable request that someone can actually respond to. Think of it like ordering at a restaurant. If you sit down and tell the waiter, "I'm hungry, bring me something," you might get a plate of food you never wanted. But if you say, "I'd love the grilled salmon with steamed vegetables and a side of rice," you get exactly what you need. Clarity is kindness. It makes it easier for the other person to help you, and it makes you feel more confident in the asking. The second ingredient is confidence, and I want to be very specific about what I mean. Confidence is not arrogance. It's not puffing your chest out and demanding things. Confidence is simply the quiet belief that you are worthy of making a request. That's all. Notice the difference between these two approaches. I'm so sorry to bother you. This is probably a stupid question, but I was just wondering if maybe, possibly, you might have time to, versus, I'd really value your perspective on something. Would you have 20 minutes this week to chat? The first one apologizes for existing. The second one stands on its own 2 feet. Same question. Completely different energy. Completely different results. When you apologize before you even ask, you're telling the other person, this isn't worth your time. And guess what? They'll believe you. The third ingredient is consideration, making the ask feel good for both sides. Nobody wants to feel used. Nobody wants to feel like they're just a means to an end. The most effective askers understand that every request is a relationship moment. It's a chance to show that you've thought about the other person, not just yourself. Instead of, give me a promotion, it's, here's the value I've delivered this quarter, and here's my vision for contributing even more in a senior role. Can we discuss what that path looks like? Instead of, lend me money, it's, I have a plan for how this support would help me and a clear timeline for paying you back. Would you be open to hearing it? See the difference? In both cases, you're asking for the same thing, but the framing transforms it from a one-sided demand into a collaborative conversation, and people respond to collaboration. They want to feel like partners, not ATMs. Now let me address some myths that might still be rattling around in your head. Myth number 1. If I truly deserve it, they'll offer it without me asking. This is perhaps the most dangerous belief of all. The reality? People are swimming in their own lives. They're managing their own stress, their own goals, their own problems. They're not sitting around scanning the horizon for someone to reward. If you want something, you need to make it visible. Waiting to be noticed is not a strategy. It's a gamble with terrible odds. Myth number 2. Asking makes me look weak. Actually, the opposite is true. Think about the people you respect most. Chances are they're not the ones sitting silently in the corner. They're the ones who speak up, who advocate for themselves, who have the courage to say, this is what I need. That takes strength, real, bone-deep strength. Myth number 3, if they say no, I've failed. A no is not a failure, it's a data point. It's the universe saying, not this way, not right now, not with this person. It's information you can use to refine your approach, adjust your timing, or find a better door to knock on. Failure is never asking at all. Failure is letting fear make your decisions for you. Here's what I want you to practice this week. One small ask per day. That's it. Ask a colleague for feedback on your work. Ask a barista if there's a discount you don't know about. Ask a friend for a book recommendation. Ask your partner how their day really went. Not the surface answer, the real one. These micro asks are like push-ups for your courage. They are small enough that the stakes feel manageable, but powerful enough that they start rewiring your brain. They teach you, through experience, that asking doesn't destroy you. It connects you. Chapter 3. The invisible walls between you and boldness. If asking is so powerful, if it's a learnable skill with a clear formula, then why do so many people still hold back? Why does knowing the right thing to do so rarely translate into actually doing it? Because between knowing and doing stands a fortress of invisible walls. Walls you didn't build consciously, walls you might not even see, but walls that control your behavior every single day. Let's walk through them, one by one, because you can't tear down what you can't see. The first wall is the fear of rejection. We've touched on this, but let's go deeper. Rejection doesn't just hurt in the moment, it echoes. It reaches back through time and connects to every rejection you've ever experienced. The friend who stopped calling, the parent who wasn't impressed, the teacher who overlooked you, the partner who walked away. When you face a potential no today, Your brain doesn't evaluate it in isolation. It stacks it on top of every no that came before. That's why a simple thing like asking your manager for a new responsibility can feel like standing on the edge of a cliff. Your rational mind knows the worst that happens is they say, "Not right now." But your emotional mind is replaying a highlight reel of every time you were made to feel small. The antidote? Understanding that rejection is almost never about you. It's about timing. It's about the other person's capacity. It's about circumstances you can't see from where you're standing. The person who says no to your request might be dealing with a crisis you know nothing about. Their no is about their world, not your worth. The second wall is the fear of judgment. What will they think of me? This question has silenced more dreams than any obstacle in history. We imagine that people are watching us, analyzing our every move, keeping score. But here's the reality. People are spectacularly, beautifully self-absorbed, not in a cruel way. They're just busy living their own lives, fighting their own battles, worrying about their own fears. The amount of time someone spends thinking about your request is a fraction of what you imagine. They'll consider it, respond, and move on. You're the only one replaying it at 3 in the morning. The third wall is limiting beliefs, the stories you tell yourself about who you are and what you deserve. People like me don't get opportunities like that. I'm not smart enough, experienced enough, connected enough. Good things happen to other people. These narratives feel like facts. They feel as solid and unchangeable as gravity. But they're not facts. They're scripts, written by experiences you didn't choose, reinforced by repetition, and maintained by avoidance. And scripts can be rewritten. The most powerful question you can ask yourself when a limiting belief surfaces is this. Is this actually true, or is this just familiar? Familiar and true are not the same thing. Something can feel absolutely certain and still be completely wrong. The fourth wall is overthinking. Your mind is a spectacular storytelling machine. Give it a potential ask, and it will produce an entire catastrophe film. What if I ask and they get angry? What if it ruins the friendship? What if they tell everyone and I become a joke? These scenarios feel vivid, detailed, almost prophetic. But they're fiction. They're your brain's attempt to keep you safe by imagining every possible danger. Here's what actually happens in most cases. You ask, they answer. Life continues. That's it. No catastrophe, no apocalypse. Just a moment of courage followed by a moment of truth. The fifth wall is waiting for permission. Somewhere along the way, many of us absorb the belief that we need permission to want things, permission to ask, permission to dream bigger. We're waiting for someone, a boss, a mentor, a parent, a sign from the universe to tap us on the shoulder and say, "You're ready. Go ahead." But that tap never comes, not because you're not ready, but because no one else can give you permission to live your own life. That authority belongs to you. It always has. The sixth wall is guilt. I should be grateful for what I have. It's selfish to want more. Other people have it worse. Gratitude and ambition are not enemies. You can hold deep appreciation for what you have while still reaching for more. In fact, the most grateful people I've ever met are also the most ambitious because they understand that growth is not greed. Growth is honoring the potential you were given. The seventh wall is the comfort zone. Silence is comfortable, Not asking means not risking. But comfort is a seductive trap. It feels safe, warm, and familiar. And slowly, quietly, imperceptibly, it suffocates everything you could become. Every dream you've ever had lives on the other side of your comfort zone. Every opportunity, every connection, every version of yourself that you admire in your imagination, they all require you to step beyond what feels easy. So how do you break through these walls? Start by flipping the question. Instead of asking yourself, what if they say no? Try asking, what if they say yes? Instead of imagining the worst case, imagine the best. What doors might open? What might change? What might become possible? Fear shrinks in the presence of possibility. Doubt dissolves when you focus on potential instead of pain. Here's something I want you to carry with you. Not asking doesn't protect you from pain. It protects you from progress. The people who achieve remarkable things aren't the ones who eliminated fear. They're the ones who learned to walk beside it. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision that something else matters more. And what matters more than fear? Your dreams, your growth, your life. Key takeaway from this section. The walls between you and bold asking are invisible, but they are not invincible. Fear, guilt, limiting beliefs, overthinking, these are all patterns, not permanence. Once you see them clearly, you can step right through them. And on the other side, everything you've been waiting for is already waiting for you. Chapter 4. The Magic of Being Specific. Let me paint a picture for you. Imagine you walk into a bookstore, not a small one of those sprawling, multi-floor places with thousands of titles lining every wall. You approach the person behind the counter and say, "I want a book." They stare at you, they blink, they wait. "What kind of book?" they ask. You shrug. "Just a good one. Something that helps me, get better at stuff." Now imagine how different that conversation would be if you said, "I'm looking for a practical book on negotiation skills, something written in the last 5 years, preferably with real-world case studies. Do you have anything like that?" Night and day. The first request leaves the other person stranded, guessing, unsure how to help. The second gives them a clear map. They know exactly where to take you. They might even light up because now they can actually be useful. This is the power of clarity, and it is the backbone of every successful ask you will ever make. Here's the uncomfortable truth most people avoid. When your ask is vague, it's not because you're being polite or flexible. It's because you haven't done the inner work of figuring out what you actually want. And if you don't know what you want, how on earth can anyone else help you get it? Clarity begins before you open your mouth. It begins in the quiet moment when you sit with yourself and ask, what do I really need here? Not kind of need, not sort of want. What is the specific thing that would make a difference? This is where most people trip. They skip this step entirely. They walk into conversations with a foggy sense of wanting more or better or something different, and then they wonder why the other person looks confused or says no. Let me share something with you. I once heard about a young architect in Istanbul who spent 2 years hoping her firm would notice her potential and promote her. 2 years of staying late, volunteering for extra projects, delivering exceptional work. And nothing happened, not because her work wasn't outstanding, it was, but because she never once walked into her manager's office and said the words, One afternoon, after a particularly frustrating week, she finally did. But she didn't just say, "I want a promotion." She said, "I've led 4 successful projects this year, each delivered ahead of schedule. I've mentored 2 junior designers. I'd like to discuss transitioning into the senior architect role in the next quarter. And I'd love to understand what specific milestones you'd need to see from me to make that happen." Her manager paused, smiled, and said, "I've been waiting for you to ask." Waiting for you to ask. 4 words that changed her career, not because the opportunity wasn't there, it had been there the whole time. But the door needed her to knock, and more importantly, it needed her to knock with precision. That's what clarity does. It transforms a wish into a request. It turns fog into focus, and it makes the other person's job infinitely easier. Let's break down the anatomy of a clear ask, because once you understand the structure, you can use it anywhere. A clear ask has 3 bones. First, what you want. Be specific. Not, "I'd like more responsibility," but "I'd like to lead the client presentation next Thursday." Not, "I need support," but "Could you pick up the kids on Wednesday evening so I can attend my evening class?" Specificity is not demanding. Specificity is kind. It removes guesswork. It shows respect for the other person's time and mental energy. Second, why you want it. People are far more willing to help when they understand the purpose behind your request. "I'd like to lead the presentation because I'm working on my public speaking skills, and this would be a great opportunity to practice in a real setting." "I'd like Wednesday evenings free because this certification will help me advance, which benefits our whole family long term." Purpose transforms your ask from a random request into a meaningful conversation. Third, what action you'd like them to take. Make it easy for them to say yes. Don't leave them guessing about what their role is. "Would you be open to letting me take the lead on Thursday? Could we try this arrangement for the next 2 months and see how it goes?" When someone knows exactly what you're asking them to do, the friction disappears. Decision-making becomes simple. Now, let me address something that might be lurking beneath the surface. Sometimes people stay vague on purpose, not because they're lazy, but because vagueness feels safer. If you don't ask clearly, you can't be clearly rejected. If your request is hazy enough, a no doesn't sting as much because you can tell yourself, "Well, they didn't really understand what I meant." But this is a trap. Vague asking creates its own form of rejection, a slow, quiet kind. The kind where people nod politely and then do nothing. The kind where your needs go unmet, not because anyone refused, but because no one understood. Boldness and clarity are dance partners. You need both. If you're brave enough to ask, be brave enough to be specific about what you're asking for. One more thing about clarity that most people overlook. Clarity builds your own confidence. When you take the time to get specific about your ask, when you write it down, refine it, practice saying it aloud, something shifts inside you. The act of clarifying what you want is itself an act of self-respect. It says, "My needs are worth defining. My desires are worth articulating. I matter enough to be precise." And that energy, that quiet self-assurance comes through when you speak. People feel it, they trust it, and they respond to it. Here's a challenge for you right now. Think of one thing you've been wanting to ask someone for. Now strip away the vagueness. Get ruthlessly specific. Write it down in 1 or 2 sentences. What exactly do you want? Why? What would you like them to do? Hold those sentences in your mind. You'll need them sooner than you think. Chapter 5. The Rhythm of Perfect Timing. You could have the clearest ask in the world, delivered with perfect confidence, wrapped in genuine respect, and still hear no. Not because your request was wrong, but because your timing was off. Timing is the invisible ingredient that most people completely ignore. They focus on what to say and how to say it, but they forget to consider when. And when changes everything. Think of it like music. A perfectly played note hit at the wrong beat becomes noise. The same note played at exactly the right moment becomes art. Your ask is that note. And the conversation, the relationship, the situation, that's the song. You need to feel the rhythm before you play. Let me give you an example. Imagine you want to ask your partner for something important, maybe more quality time together, maybe a change in how you divide responsibilities at home. Now imagine you choose to bring this up right after they've had a terrible day at work. They walk through the door exhausted, frustrated, carrying the weight of 8 hours of stress on their shoulders. And before they've even set down their bag, you launch into your request. What happens? Resistance, defensiveness, maybe even an argument. Not because your need isn't valid, it absolutely is, but because you tried to plant a seed in concrete, the ground wasn't ready. Now imagine the same conversation, but you wait. You let them decompress. Maybe you share a quiet dinner. Maybe you take a walk together on the weekend when the pressure has lifted. And then, in a calm, connected moment, you say, "There's something I'd love to talk about with you. Is now a good time?" Same ask, same words, completely different outcome, because you read the room. You felt the rhythm. You waited for the right beat. This is emotional intelligence in action, and it's one of the most underrated skills in the art of asking. So how do you develop this sense of timing? It starts with observation. Before you ask, take a moment to notice. What's the other person's energy right now? Are they relaxed or tense? Open or closed off? Engaged or distracted? Are they leaning in, making eye contact, laughing? That's an open door. Are they checking their phone, sighing, avoiding conversation? That's a closed one. You don't need to be a psychologist to read these signals. You just need to pay attention. Most people are so focused on their own request that they forget to look at the person they're about to ask. They're rehearsing their lines instead of reading the room. Let me share some general patterns that tend to hold true across most situations. People are more receptive when they're in a positive emotional state. This isn't manipulation, it's human nature. When someone feels good, relaxed, appreciated, or successful, their brain is more open to new information, new requests, new possibilities. Their guard is down. Their generosity is up. People are more inclined to say yes after you've provided value. This is the principle of reciprocity, one of the deepest currents in human psychology. When you've recently helped someone, supported them, or contributed something meaningful, there's a natural, unconscious desire to return the favor. Your ask, coming after genuine value, feels balanced rather than entitled. People are more open when the stakes feel low. If someone is in the middle of a deadline, a crisis, or a life-altering decision, adding your request to their plate feels like stacking more weight on an already bending shelf. Wait for the calm between the storms. Now, there are also traps to avoid. Don't ask during emotional turbulence. If someone is angry, grieving, anxious, or overwhelmed, their bandwidth for processing new requests is essentially zero. Even a perfectly reasonable ask will feel like an imposition. Give them space. Give them time. Your ask can wait. Their well-being cannot. Don't ambush people publicly unless you know they'd welcome it. Some people feel supported by public recognition or requests. Others feel cornered. When in doubt, ask privately. You can always go public later if the moment calls for it. Don't rush relationships. If you've just met someone, jumping straight to a significant ask can feel jarring, like a stranger asking to borrow your car. Build rapport first. Show genuine interest. Offer value. Let trust develop naturally. Then, when the time comes, your ask arrives on a foundation of goodwill rather than thin air. Here's a tactical move that works beautifully in almost every context. Ask permission before you ask. It sounds redundant, but it's remarkably effective. There's something I'd love to discuss with you. Would now be a good time, or would later work better? This single sentence accomplishes three things at once. It signals respect. It gives the other person control over the timing. And it primes them to be receptive because they've chosen to engage. Now, a word of caution. Timing matters, but don't let it become an excuse. There's a fine line between strategic patience and fear dressed up as wisdom. If you find yourself constantly saying, "It's not the right time," ask yourself honestly whether you're truly reading the situation or whether you're hiding behind timing as a way to avoid the discomfort of asking. The perfect moment rarely arrives gift-wrapped with a bow on top. Sometimes you have to create the moment. Sometimes good enough timing is good enough. Don't wait for perfection. Wait for readiness, theirs and yours, and then step forward. Chapter 6. Releasing the Weight of Guilt. There's a quiet epidemic that nobody talks about. It lives in the hearts of kind, thoughtful, generous people, the ones who always put others first, who always say it's fine when it's not, who swallow their needs because they're terrified of being seen as selfish. It's guilt. And it is silently suffocating millions of voices. If you've ever felt a knot in your stomach before asking for something, if you've ever started a sentence with, "I'm sorry, but," or "I hate to ask," if you've ever convinced yourself that wanting more makes you ungrateful, then you know this weight. You carry it every day. And I want you to know something. That guilt, it's lying to you. Guilt tells you that asking is selfish. The truth is, asking is honest. Guilt tells you that your needs are a burden. The truth is, unexpressed needs become resentment, and resentment is far heavier than any request. Guilt tells you that good people don't ask for things. The truth is, the kindest, most generous people you know got that way partly because they learned to ask for what they need, which gave them the energy and capacity to give so freely. Let me put this another way. You cannot pour from an empty cup. If you never ask for refills, eventually you have nothing left to offer anyone, including yourself. Asking isn't taking. It's replenishing. It's sustaining. It's making sure you have enough to continue being the person you want to be. So where does this guilt come from? Usually it comes from stories. Stories planted so deep that they feel like absolute truth. I shouldn't need help. Strong people figure things out alone. If I ask, they'll think I'm weak or incapable. Other people have real problems. Mine don't count. These aren't truths. They're fear in disguise, fear wearing a mask of politeness, fear pretending to be humility, fear dressed up as virtue so you won't question it. But I'm asking you to question it now. Ask yourself, when you feel guilty about asking for something, whose voice is that? Is it yours? Or is it the voice of a parent who never learned to express their own needs? A teacher who rewarded silence over initiative? A culture that confused meekness with morality? Guilt is often inherited. You picked it up from the environment you grew up in, and you've been carrying it ever since without realizing you have the option to put it down. Here's the truth that changes everything. Asking does not force anyone to say yes. It simply opens a door. The other person is entirely free to walk through it or not. Your ask is not a command, not an obligation, not a chain around their neck. It's an invitation. And invitations are one of the most generous things humans exchange. When you ask clearly and respectfully, you're actually giving the other person a gift. You're giving them clarity about what you need, which means they don't have to guess, assume, or read your mind. You're giving them the opportunity to help, and most people genuinely enjoy helping when they can. You're giving them the chance to strengthen the relationship through honest exchange. Think about how it feels when someone you care about comes to you and says, "I need your help with something." Does it feel like a burden, or does it feel like trust? For most people, being asked feels like being respected, like being seen as capable and valuable. You are not an exception to this. When you ask someone for help, you're offering them the same experience. Now let me give you a practical framework for guilt-free asking. It starts with language. Strip the apology from your vocabulary when making requests. Instead of, "Sorry to bother you, but could you maybe?" Try, "Would you be open to?" Instead of, "I feel terrible asking, but," try, "I'd really appreciate your help with." Instead of, "I know you're busy and this is probably too much to ask." Try, "When you have a moment, I'd love your input on." Notice how the second versions in each pair carry no guilt, no shame, no preemptive apology. They're direct, respectful, and clean. They communicate confidence without arrogance. They make the other person feel like you believe they're capable of handling your request, which is itself a form of respect. The other piece of releasing guilt is detaching your self-worth from the outcome. This is crucial. When you tie your value as a person to whether someone says yes or no, every ask becomes a referendum on your worth. And that's an unbearable amount of pressure to put on a simple question. Your worth is not determined by someone's answer. A no doesn't mean you're less valuable. A yes doesn't make you more worthy. You are worthy before, during, and after the ask, regardless of the outcome. The answer belongs to them. Your worth belongs to you. I want you to try something this week. The next time you feel the urge to apologize before asking for something, catch yourself. Pause. Take a breath. And instead of leading with guilt, lead with clarity. State what you need simply and directly. See what happens. I think you'll find that the sky doesn't fall. People don't recoil. In fact, most people respond better to clean, confident requests than to guilt-laden, apologetic ones. Because when you ask without guilt, you give the other person permission to respond without guilt too. You create a space where honesty flows freely in both directions. And that's the foundation of every healthy relationship, professional or personal. Not mind reading, not assumption, not silent suffering. Clear, respectful, guilt-free communication. Let go of the weight. You've carried it long enough. The freedom you're looking for isn't on the other side of someone else's approval. It's on the other side of your own permission. Permission to want, to need, to ask, and to receive without shame. You have that permission right now. You've always had it. Now it's time to use it. Key takeaway from this section: clarity makes your ask impossible to misunderstand. Timing makes it land with grace, and releasing guilt makes it sustainable. Master these three elements, and you won't just ask more effectively, you'll transform the way you move through every conversation, every relationship, every opportunity in your life. Chapter 7. The Architecture of Yes. Here's something that might change the way you think about every conversation you'll ever have. When someone says yes to you, it's rarely because of a single thing you did right. It's because of a dozen invisible forces working together beneath the surface, like the roots of a tree holding it upright while the world only sees the branches. Getting a yes is not luck. It's not charm. It's not some mystical gift handed to a select few at birth. It's architecture, it's structure, and once you understand how it's built, you can construct it deliberately, consistently, and with remarkable accuracy. Let me walk you through the blueprint. The foundation is preparation. And I don't mean casually thinking about your request while you're brushing your teeth that morning. I mean sitting down, getting quiet, and doing the real work before you ever open your mouth. Ask yourself these questions before any important ask. What exactly do I want? Not approximately. Exactly. Why should this person care? What's in it for them? What concerns might they have, and how can I address them before they even raise them? What's the best possible framing for this request? Most people skip this step entirely. They wing it. They walk into conversations hoping the right words will magically appear. And sometimes they do. But hope is not a strategy. Preparation is. Think about a chef preparing a complex dish. They don't just throw ingredients into a pot and pray. They measure, they taste, they adjust, they time everything precisely. Your ask deserves the same level of care, because a well-prepared ask doesn't just increase your chances of hearing yes. It transforms the entire quality of the conversation. The second element of the architecture is framing. This is where artistry meets psychology, and it's one of the most powerful tools you'll ever learn. Framing is not about changing what you're asking for. It's about changing how the other person perceives it. The same request can feel like a burden or an opportunity, a demand or an invitation, depending entirely on how you frame it. Consider this example. Imagine you're approaching a potential mentor. You could say, I need someone to help me figure out my career because I'm lost and confused. Or you could say, I've been following your work for a while, and I'm deeply inspired by your approach. I'm at a pivotal point in my career, and I believe even a brief conversation with you could help me gain clarity on my next steps. Would you be open to a 20-minute coffee chat? Same underlying need, but the first version positions you as a drain on their energy. The second positions the interaction as a meaningful exchange built on genuine admiration. Which one would you say yes to? Framing isn't manipulation, it's empathy. It's taking the time to see your request through the other person's eyes and presenting it in a way that resonates with their values, their priorities, their sense of purpose. When someone feels like your ask aligns with who they are, saying yes becomes natural, almost effortless. The third element is language. Words are not neutral vessels. They carry weight, temperature, and texture. The words you choose when making a request create an emotional atmosphere before the other person even processes the content. Compare these two approaches. I was just kind of wondering if there's any chance you might possibly consider maybe helping me with something, versus, I'd love your perspective on something important. Could we find 15 minutes this week? The first one sounds like someone tiptoeing through a minefield. It radiates uncertainty, which triggers uncertainty in the listener. The second one sounds like someone who knows their own value and respects the other person's time. It radiates quiet confidence, which inspires trust. Eliminate weak language from your asking vocabulary. Words like just, maybe, possibly, kind of, sort of. These are confidence killers. They signal to the other person that even you don't believe your request is worth their attention. If you don't believe it, why should they? Replace them with clean, direct alternatives. Would you be open to, could we explore? I'd appreciate your input on, I'm reaching out because. These phrases carry no apology, no hesitation, no self-doubt. They stand on solid ground. The fourth element is reciprocity, and this one runs deeper than most people realize. Human beings are wired for balance. It's baked into our social DNA. When someone gives us something, whether it's time, attention, a favor, or a compliment, we feel an almost magnetic pull to give something back. Psychologists call this the reciprocity principle, and it's one of the most reliable patterns in human behavior. What does this mean for your asks? It means that the more you give before you ask, the more natural your request feels when it arrives. Not because you're keeping score, not because you're manipulating anyone, but because genuine generosity creates a current of goodwill that carries your requests forward. Think about the colleague who always helps others before asking for help themselves. When they finally make a request, people practically line up to support them. Contrast that with the person who only shows up when they need something. Their asks feel transactional, hollow, and easy to decline. Be the first type. Give generously. Give without keeping a track. And when the time comes to ask, your request will land on fertile ground that you've been cultivating all along. The fifth element is social proof, and it works more subtly than you might expect. People don't make decisions in a vacuum. They look around. They wonder, has anyone else said yes to this kind of request? Is this normal? Am I taking a risk by agreeing? Or is this a safe, reasonable thing to do? When you can naturally weave in evidence that others have supported similar requests, you reduce the perceived risk of saying yes. A few colleagues have already volunteered for this initiative, and I'd love for you to be part of it too. I spoke with 2 other mentors who both encouraged me to reach out to you specifically. Several clients have responded really well to this approach, and I think it could work for your situation too. This isn't name-dropping, it's context-building. You're not pressuring anyone. You're simply showing that your request exists within a framework of trust and validation that makes saying yes feel safer. The 6th element is energy, and this one is easy to overlook but impossible to fake. When you ask for something, the energy you bring to the conversation matters as much as the words you use. If you ask with a flat voice, drooping shoulders, and an expression that says, "I already expect you to say no," guess what? They probably will, because your energy told them this wasn't worth their enthusiasm before you even finished speaking. But when you ask with genuine warmth, with belief in your request, with a spark of excitement or sincerity that lights up the space between you, people lean in. They mirror your energy. They catch your conviction like catching a melody, and suddenly saying yes feels like joining something good. This doesn't mean being loud or over the top. It means being present. It means caring about what you're asking for and letting that care show. Authenticity is the most magnetic energy there is. The seventh element is handling the not yet with grace. Sometimes the answer isn't no. It's not right now. It's maybe later. It's I need to think about it. These responses are gold, not garbage. They're open doors, not closed ones. When someone hesitates, don't panic. Don't over-explain. Don't fill the silence with a flood of justifications. Instead, lean into curiosity. I completely understand. Is there anything I could clarify that might help? Of course. Would it be okay if I followed up next week? I respect that. Is there a better time for us to revisit this? These responses demonstrate patience, maturity, and respect. They keep the door open without forcing anyone through it, and more often than you'd expect, a not yet quietly transforms into a yes once the other person has had time to sit with it. One more thing about the architecture of yes. Gratitude is the final brick. Regardless of what someone says, whether it's an enthusiastic yes, a hesitant maybe, or a firm no, respond with genuine appreciation. Thank you for considering it. I appreciate you taking the time. I'm grateful you are honest with me. Gratitude doesn't just close the current conversation well, it lays the groundwork for every future conversation. People remember how you made them feel. And when you leave every interaction with warmth and appreciation, they'll think of you favorably long after the conversation ends. Today's graceful thank you can become tomorrow's unexpected yes. Chapter 8. Small sparks, big fires. There's a bamboo tree in Southeast Asia that spends its first 5 years growing underground. 5 years. No visible progress. No shoots above the surface. Just roots spreading silently through the dark soil. And then, in its 6th year, it erupts. It shoots upward as much as 90 feet in a single season. Most people, watching from above, would say the growth happened overnight. But anyone who understands what was happening beneath the surface knows the truth. That explosive growth was 5 years in the making. This is exactly how small asks work. The biggest opportunities in life rarely arrive through a single dramatic request. They're built quietly, patiently, one small ask at a time, like roots spreading underground, until the moment is right for everything to break through. Most people misunderstand this completely. They think success comes from one grand gesture, one bold proposal, one life-changing conversation. So they wait for that perfect moment, that big ask, that all-or-nothing shot. And while they wait, they do nothing. Meanwhile, the people who actually build remarkable lives are doing something far less dramatic, but infinitely more powerful. They're making small requests, consistently, strategically, without fanfare. They ask for 5 minutes of someone's time. They ask for feedback on a project. They ask for an introduction to a colleague. They ask for a recommendation, a perspective, a small piece of advice. None of these feel monumental in the moment, but each one is a seed, and seeds, given patience and care, become forests. Here's why small asks are so strategically brilliant. First, they build trust. Trust is not built in a single moment, it's built through repeated positive interactions. Every small ask that you handle with respect, gratitude, and follow-through deposits a coin into the trust bank. Over time, that account grows. And when you eventually make a larger request, you're not asking from zero. You're drawing on a rich account of proven reliability. Second, small asks create familiarity. Human beings are drawn to what they know. The more someone interacts with you, even in minor ways, the more comfortable they become with you. This comfort lowers resistance. It opens doors that would remain firmly shut for a stranger making a cold, ambitious request. Third, small asks generate momentum. Every yes, no matter how small, shifts something inside you. It reinforces the belief that asking works, that people are willing to help, that you're capable of creating outcomes through your words. This momentum builds on itself. Small yeses give you the confidence to pursue bigger ones. Let me give you a practical example. Imagine you want to transition into a completely new industry. You know no one in that field. You have no connections, no inside knowledge, no obvious path forward. The instinct most people follow is to send out dozens of applications into the void and hope for the best. But the strategic asker takes a different approach. They start by identifying 3 people working in that industry whose careers they admire. They send a thoughtful message. I'm exploring a transition into this field, and your career path really resonates with me. Would you have 15 minutes for a brief conversation? I'd love to hear about your experience. That's a small ask. Low commitment, low risk, high potential. One of those 3 people says yes. During the conversation, the strategic asker listens intently, asks thoughtful questions, and at the end says, "This has been incredibly helpful. Is there anyone else you'd recommend I speak with?" Another small ask. And now, one conversation has become 2, then 3, then 5. Each conversation builds knowledge, builds connections, builds credibility. 6 months later, when a position opens up in that industry, the strategic asker doesn't apply cold. They reach out to someone they've already built a relationship with and say, "I saw this role and I think it might be a great fit. Would you be willing to refer me?" That's still an ask, but it lands on a foundation of trust, familiarity, and mutual respect that was built one small conversation at a time. The person who sent 100 blind applications is still waiting to hear back. The person who made 10 small asks over 6 months just got their foot in the door. This is the compounding power of small asks. Each one is a brick. Alone, a brick is nothing special. But stack enough of them with intention, and you build something that can weather any storm. Here's what matters most after a small ask is granted. Follow through impeccably. If someone gives you 5 minutes, don't take 15. If someone gives you advice, implement it and tell them what happened. If someone makes an introduction, follow up promptly and circle back with gratitude. People remember how you handle the small things, and how you handle the small things tells them everything they need to know about whether you deserve the big ones. Chapter 9. The Alchemy of No. Let's talk about the word that terrifies most people. The word that keeps millions of mouths shut, millions of hands down, millions of dreams locked inside chests, too afraid to beat loudly. No, 2 letters, 1 syllable. And yet it carries more psychological weight than almost any other word in the human language. People rearrange their entire lives to avoid hearing it. They shrink their ambitions, silence their desires, and settle for less than they deserve, all because somewhere deep inside they believe that hearing no will break something in them that can't be repaired. But what if I told you that no is not a wall? What if it's actually a window? Let me tell you about a writer from a small coastal town in Portugal. She spent 3 years working on her first novel. It was the kind of book that lived inside her bones, the kind of story she felt she was born to tell. When she finally finished it, she sent it to a publishing house, hands trembling, heart full of hope. They said no. She sent it to another, no again, and another, no. Over the course of 18 months, she received 31 rejections, 31 different versions of "not for us." Doesn't fit our current catalog? We'll pass. 31 no's. Most people would have stopped after 5. Many would have quit after 10. By 20, nearly everyone would have tucked that manuscript into a drawer and never looked at it again. But she didn't stop, because somewhere along the way, she made a decision that changed everything. She decided that each rejection wasn't a verdict on her talent. It was information about the journey. Each no taught her something. Some taught her about the industry. Some taught her about her query letter. Some taught her about timing and market trends. And a few taught her absolutely nothing except that persistence is its own kind of genius. Publisher number 32 said yes. Her novel went on to sell hundreds of thousands of copies. But here's the part of the story most people miss. The book didn't change between rejection 20 and rejection 32. It was the same manuscript, the same words, the same story. What changed was the door she knocked on. This is the alchemy of no. It doesn't mean your request is wrong. It doesn't mean you're unworthy. It often means nothing more than this. You haven't found the right door yet. And you won't find the right door by standing still. Let's reshape how you think about rejection, because the framework you use to interpret no determines whether it stops you or fuels you. Framework 1 is the old way. No means I'm not good enough. I was wrong to ask. I should stop trying. This is humiliating. I knew this would happen. This framework is a dead end. It turns every rejection into a mirror that reflects your worst fears back at you. It paralyzes, it shrinks, it silences. Framework 2 is the new way. No means not this door, not this time, not this approach. What can I learn? Who else can I ask? How can I refine? What's the next step? This framework is a compass. It turns every rejection into a data point, a course correction, a stepping stone. It energizes, it expands, it propels. Same word, completely different experience. The difference isn't what happened to you. It's the story you tell yourself about what happened. Here's something practical you can do every time you receive a no. Pause, breathe, resist the urge to spiral, and then ask yourself 3 questions. Was my ask clear enough? Sometimes people say no because they didn't fully understand what you were requesting. Clarity issues are easy to fix. Was my timing right? Maybe the person was overwhelmed, distracted, or dealing with something you couldn't see. Timing issues resolve themselves if you're patient enough to try again. Was this the right person to ask? Not everyone is in a position to say yes to you, no matter how good your request is. Some doors are simply wrong doors, and that's not a failure, that's navigation. If you can answer these questions honestly, every no becomes a teacher. And teachers are far more valuable than cheerleaders. Cheerleaders make you feel good. Teachers make you better. Now let me address the emotional side because, let's be honest, even when you intellectually understand that rejection isn't personal, it still hurts. It still stings. It still makes you want to crawl under a blanket and pretend you never asked. That's okay. That's human. You don't have to pretend rejection doesn't affect you. You just have to make sure it doesn't define you. Feel the sting. Acknowledge the disappointment. Give yourself 5 minutes, an hour, a day to sit with it. But then get up, dust yourself off, and ask again. Because here's the math that changes everything. If you ask 10 times and get 9 no's and 1 yes, you've achieved something real, something tangible. The person who never asked because they were afraid of the 9 no's, they have 0. 9 no's and 1 yes will always beat 0 asks and 0 results. There's a concept I want to share with you that I find incredibly freeing. It's called rejection inoculation. The idea is simple. The more you expose yourself to rejection, the less power it has over you. Your first rejection feels catastrophic. Your 5th feels uncomfortable. Your 20th feels like a Tuesday. This isn't about becoming numb or hardened. It's about building resilience, the kind of resilience that allows you to keep showing up, keep asking, keep pursuing your goals, even when the road gets rocky. Resilience isn't something you're born with. It's something you build, one no at a time. Think about the people you admire most, the entrepreneurs, the artists, the leaders, the change makers. Every single one of them has a rejection story. Most have dozens. Some have hundreds. Their success wasn't built on a foundation of universal approval. It was built on the willingness to keep going when approval didn't come. They didn't succeed because they avoided rejection. They succeeded because they refused to let rejection be the final chapter of their story. And neither should you. So the next time someone says no to you, I want you to do something counterintuitive. I want you to smile, even if it's just on the inside, because that no is proof of something important. It's proof that you asked. It's proof that you showed up. It's proof that you're playing the game instead of watching from the sidelines. And anyone who's playing the game, who's actively reaching, stretching, asking, risking, is already ahead of the vast majority of people who never found the courage to try. Rejection is not the opposite of success. Inaction is. Rejection is simply the toll you pay on the road to getting where you want to go. Pay it gladly. Pay it often. And keep driving. Key takeaway from this section. Yes is built, not stumbled upon. It has an architecture of preparation, framing, language, reciprocity, and energy. Small asks are the invisible roots that support enormous growth. And rejection is not a wall, it's a window showing you where to go next. Master all 3, and you become someone who doesn't just hope for opportunities. You engineer them. Chapter 10. The Compound Effect of Courage. There's a jar sitting on a kitchen counter. Every morning someone drops a single coin into it. 1 coin, barely worth noticing. For the first week, the jar looks empty. After a month, there's a thin layer at the bottom. After 6 months, it's starting to fill. After a year, it's heavy. After 5 years, it's overflowing. No single coin made the difference. But the habit of dropping one in every single day without fail created something remarkable. This is exactly how confidence works. And asking is the coin. Most people think of confidence as something you either have or you don't, like eye color or height. Something fixed and permanent, distributed unevenly at birth. The naturally confident people got a full jar. Everyone else got scraps. But this is one of the biggest misconceptions in human psychology. Confidence is not a trait, it's a rhythm. It's the accumulated residue of actions taken, risks survived, and moments where you chose to move forward instead of standing still. And there is no faster, more reliable way to build that rhythm than through the habit of asking. Every time you ask for something, no matter how small, you send a signal to your brain, a signal that says, I matter enough to make requests, my needs are valid, my voice deserves to be heard. And every time you survive the outcome, whether it's a yes, a no, or something in between, you send another signal. I can handle whatever comes back. I am resilient. I am still standing. These signals stack. They layer on top of each other like sediment forming stone. And over time, something that felt terrifying at first, opening your mouth and asking for what you want, starts to feel as natural as breathing. But here's the part most people miss. You don't build this kind of confidence through a single heroic act. You don't wake up one morning, make one bold request, and suddenly transform into an unshakable force of nature. That's the movie version of confidence. The real version is quieter, slower, and infinitely more powerful. It starts with micro-asks, the smallest, lowest stakes requests you can imagine. Ask the waiter for a table by the window instead of accepting whatever's available. Ask your colleague what they honestly thought of your presentation instead of assuming it was fine. Ask the stranger at the networking event what they're working on instead of hovering silently near the coffee table pretending to check your phone. These moments seem insignificant. They're not. Each one is a repetition at the gym of courage. Each one builds the muscle you'll need when the stakes get higher, when the ask gets bigger, when the moment arrives that requires everything you've got. I want you to think about something. How many asks have you avoided in the last year? 10? 50? 100? Each one of those avoided moments was a coin you didn't drop into the jar. And the jar stays light. The confidence stays fragile. But it's never too late to start filling it. Here's what I've observed about people who build genuine, unshakable confidence through asking. They don't measure themselves by outcomes. They measure themselves by attempts. They don't keep score of how many times they heard yes. They keep score of how many times they had the guts to ask, because they understand something profound. The asking itself is the victory. The answer is secondary. Think about that for a moment. If you asked for something meaningful today and heard no, did you fail? Or did you succeed at the hardest part, which was opening your mouth in the first place? I'd argue you succeeded every single time. Confidence also grows through reflection. Keep a record, mental or written, of the asks you make. Not just the outcomes, but how you felt before, during, and after. Over time, you'll notice something beautiful. The anxiety shrinks. The hesitation fades. The gap between wanting to ask and actually asking gets shorter and shorter until it nearly disappears. You'll look back at entries from 6 months ago and barely recognize the person who was terrified to ask for a coffee meeting, because you'll be the person who just pitched an idea to a room full of executives without breaking a sweat, not because you stopped feeling fear, but because fear stopped being in charge. There's one more dimension of confidence that deserves attention. As your confidence grows, it radiates outward. People notice, not because you're louder or more aggressive, but because you carry yourself differently. You make eye contact more easily. You speak with less filler and more purpose. You hold space in conversations instead of shrinking from them. And here's the beautiful ripple effect. When people see you asking with confidence, it gives them permission to do the same. Your courage becomes contagious. Your partner starts speaking up about their needs. Your colleague starts advocating for their ideas. Your friend starts pursuing the opportunity they've been sitting on for years. You didn't just change your own life by building the habit of asking. You changed the atmosphere around you. You became proof that asking is safe, that it's powerful, and that it's available to anyone willing to practice. That's the compound effect of courage. It starts with a single coin, it ends with an overflowing jar. And somewhere along the way, it transforms not just what you get, but who you become. Chapter 11. Bridges, not transactions. Let's step back from strategy for a moment and talk about something that lives at the very heart of asking. Something most books, most guides, most advice columns skip right over because it can't be reduced to a formula or a 5-step process. Relationships. Because here's a truth that might reframe everything you've learned so far. The most powerful asks don't happen between strangers. They happen between people who trust each other. And trust isn't built through technique. It's built through genuine human connection. When you ask someone for help, for advice, for support, for an opportunity, you're not just making a transaction, you're building a bridge. And like any bridge, it needs to be strong enough to carry weight in both directions. Think about the last time someone came to you with a request, not a stranger on the street, someone you know, someone you respect. How did it feel? If the relationship was solid, if there was trust and mutual respect between you, their ask probably felt natural, maybe even welcome. You were glad they thought of you. You were happy to help. Now think about a time when someone you barely knew, or someone who only ever showed up when they needed something, made a similar request. How did that feel? Probably different. Probably hollow. Maybe even irritating. The request was the same, but the relationship changed everything. This is why I want you to stop thinking about asking as a standalone skill and start thinking about it as a relationship practice. Every ask is an opportunity to deepen a connection, not just extract value from it. And the people who understand this distinction are the ones who build networks of genuine support that last for decades, not just until the next favor is needed. When you ask someone for their perspective, you're saying, I respect the way you think. When you ask for their guidance, you're saying, your experience has value that I want to learn from. When you ask for their help, you're saying, I trust you enough to show you that I don't have all the answers. These are not signs of weakness. They are acts of profound respect. And respect is the currency of every meaningful relationship. There's a word that gets thrown around a lot in business books: networking. And for most people, That word feels about as warm and inviting as a cold sales call. It conjures images of forced conversations at crowded events, exchanging business cards with people you'll never contact, smiling through small talk while secretly calculating what each person can do for you. That's not what I'm talking about. That's not connection. That's collection. And there's a world of difference between the two. Real connection happens when you approach people with genuine curiosity, when you ask questions not because you want something, but because you're truly interested in their answer, when you listen not to respond, but to understand, when you follow up not because you need a favor, but because something they said stayed with you. And here's the counterintuitive magic of this approach. When you build connections without an agenda, opportunities flow toward you more freely than they ever would through strategic maneuvering. People want to help those they like and trust, and they like and trust people who show up authentically, consistently, and generously. Let me give you a framework for relationship-centered asking that works in any context, professional or personal. First, lead with contribution. Before you ask anyone for anything, ask yourself what you've given, not in a transactional, score-keeping way, but genuinely. Have you offered support, encouragement, knowledge, time, or attention? Have you shown up for this person when nothing was at stake for you? Contribution creates a current of goodwill, and when you eventually make a request, it rides that current naturally. Second, ask in a way that honors the relationship. This means being mindful of what you're asking, how much you're asking, and how often. Don't treat a new acquaintance like a lifelong mentor. Don't lean on one person for everything. Distribute your asks thoughtfully. Respect boundaries. Pay attention to signals that someone is stretched thin or pulling back. Third, listen more than you speak. This is the most underrated asking skill in existence. When someone responds to your request, whether they say yes, no, or something in between, listen fully. Don't just hear the words. Hear what's beneath them. Sometimes a hesitant yes is really a request for more information. Sometimes a gentle no is an invitation to adjust your approach. And sometimes silence says more than any word ever could. Fourth, follow up with genuine appreciation, not a generic thanks tossed off in a text message. Real, specific, heartfelt gratitude. Thank you for taking the time to review my proposal. Your feedback on the third section completely changed my approach, and the revised version is so much stronger because of it. That kind of gratitude doesn't just close a loop. It opens a door for the next conversation. It makes the other person feel seen, valued, and glad they said yes. Fifth, be willing to hear hard truths. Sometimes the most valuable response to your ask isn't a yes. It's honest feedback that stings a little. Your proposal needs more work. I don't think you're ready for that role yet. The timing isn't right. These responses, delivered within a trusting relationship, are gifts. They show that the other person cares enough to be honest rather than polite. Welcome them, learn from them, and let them know you appreciate the candor. This is how asking becomes a tool for building relationships that are deep, resilient, and mutually enriching. Not transactional exchanges where both sides are keeping score, but genuine partnerships where both people grow. And here's one final thought on this. Vulnerability is the doorway to authentic connection. When you ask for help, you're showing someone that you're human, that you don't have it all figured out, that you need others. In a world where everyone is curating a perfect image, that vulnerability is startlingly refreshing. It draws people in. It makes them feel safe being vulnerable with you in return. And from that mutual openness, something rare and beautiful emerges, a relationship where both people feel free to ask, to give, to grow, and to show up exactly as they are. That's worth more than any single yes could ever be. Chapter 12. When everything is on the line. There are moments in life when the ask carries weight that you can feel in your chest. Moments when the outcome isn't just important, it's potentially life-altering. A career-defining pitch, a conversation that could save or end a relationship, a request for funding that determines whether your dream survives or dies, a negotiation where the difference between a yes and a no is the difference between the life you want and the life you settle for. These are high-stakes asks, and they play by different rules, not entirely different. Everything we've discussed still applies: clarity, timing, confidence, framing, reciprocity. But the intensity of the moment amplifies everything. Your nerves are louder, your doubts are sharper. The temptation to play it safe is almost overwhelming, and the cost of staying silent is higher than it's ever been. So how do you show up when everything is on the line? It starts long before the moment itself. Preparation is your anchor. When the pressure rises, preparation is what keeps you grounded. It's the difference between walking into a room feeling like you belong there and walking in feeling like an imposter who might be exposed at any second. Prepare obsessively. Know your material inside and out. Anticipate every question, every objection, every concern the other party might raise. Have thoughtful, composed responses ready. Not scripted responses that sound rehearsed, but internalized understanding so deep that you can speak with authority and flexibility in equal measure. Rehearse out loud. This step is non-negotiable. Thinking about what you'll say is not the same as saying it. When you hear your own voice delivering the ask, you catch weak spots, awkward phrasing, and uncertain inflections that you'd never notice in your head. Practice with a trusted friend, a mentor, or even a mirror. Record yourself if you can. Listen back. Refine. Repeat. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is familiarity. You want the words to feel comfortable in your mouth so that when the real moment arrives, your brain can focus on connection instead of construction. Now let's talk about composure, because in high-stakes situations, your demeanor speaks louder than your words. People in positions of power, decision-makers, leaders, investors, they're reading you. Before they're listening to you, they're watching your body language, your eye contact, the steadiness of your voice, the speed of your breathing. They're looking for signals of confidence, competence, and calm. This doesn't mean you have to be a robot. Nervousness is human, and most seasoned professionals recognize it and respect it. But there's a difference between visible nerves and visible panic. Nerves say, "This matters to me." Panic says, "I'm not sure I can handle this." A few practical tools for maintaining composure under pressure. Breathe intentionally. Before you enter the room, take 3 slow, deep breaths. In through the nose for 4 counts, hold for 4, out through the mouth for 6. This activates your parasympathetic nervous system and physically calms your body. It's not woo. It's biology. Slow down your speech. When we're nervous, we speed up. We rush through our words as if getting them out faster will make the discomfort end sooner. But fast speech communicates anxiety. Slow, deliberate speech communicates authority. Pause between sentences. Let your words land. Give the other person space to absorb what you've said. Anchor your body. Stand or sit with both feet flat on the floor. Keep your hands visible and relaxed. Make eye contact without staring. These physical anchors send signals to your brain that you're safe, which reduces the intensity of the fight-or-flight response. Now let's talk about framing in high-stakes situations, because the frame you set determines the entire trajectory of the conversation. In lower-stakes scenarios, framing is helpful. In high-stakes scenarios, it's everything. You must position your ask not as a favor you need, but as a strategic opportunity the other person would be wise to consider. This requires seeing the situation through their eyes with absolute clarity. What are their priorities? What problems are they trying to solve? What goals are they pursuing? How does your request align with or advance their agenda? If you can answer these questions convincingly, your ask transforms from, "Please give me something," to, "Here's how we both win." This is not about being manipulative or sycophantic. It's about genuine alignment. If your request truly serves only you with zero benefit to them, it's not a high-stakes ask. It's a high-stakes gamble. The best high-stakes asks are ones where both sides can genuinely benefit from a yes. Storytelling becomes especially powerful in these moments. Data persuades the analytical mind, but stories move the whole person. If you're pitching an idea, don't just present projections and bullet points. Paint a picture, describe the impact. Help the other person feel what success looks like, not just understand it intellectually. A brief, vivid narrative about a problem solved, a life changed, or a vision realized can do more in 30 seconds than a spreadsheet can do in 30 minutes. Not because data doesn't matter, it does, but because humans decide with emotion and justify with logic. Give them both, but lead with the story. Let's address something that many people struggle with in high-stakes situations: the fear of silence. After you make your ask, there will be a pause, sometimes a long one. The other person is processing. They're thinking. They're weighing options. And every fiber of your being will want to fill that silence, to add more arguments, to qualify your statement, to soften your ask, to backpedal. Don't. Silence is not your enemy. Silence is your ally. It gives your words room to breathe. It shows confidence. It communicates that you've said what you needed to say and you trust the other person to respond on their own terms. The person who fills silence loses power. The person who holds it gains respect. This is counterintuitive, uncomfortable, and extraordinarily effective. One more critical element of high-stakes asking: the aftermath. Whether the answer is yes or no, how you handle the moments after the ask defines how the other person will remember you. If they say yes, express gratitude with substance, not just excitement. Let them know their decision means something to you, and that you intend to honor it with action. If they say no, handle it with grace and professionalism. Thank them for their time and consideration. Leave the door open for future conversations. Do not burn bridges. Do not show bitterness. Some of the greatest professional relationships I've witnessed began with a no that was handled so gracefully that the other person couldn't stop thinking about it. They were so impressed by the composure, the maturity, the dignity of the response that they reached out weeks or months later with a different opportunity, a better one, one that fit more perfectly than the original ask ever could have. How you lose sometimes matters more than how you win. And here's the final truth about high-stakes asking. It gets easier, not because the stakes get lower, but because you get stronger. Every high-stakes conversation you navigate, regardless of the outcome, deposits courage and wisdom into your reserves. You learn what works. You learn what doesn't. You learn that the worst-case scenario almost never materializes. And you learn that you can survive it when it does. The first time you stand at the edge of a high-stakes ask, your legs might shake. The 10th time, you'll feel the nerves, but trust yourself to move through them. The 100th time, you'll walk into the room knowing that whatever happens, you've already won by showing up. Because showing up is the bravest ask of all. It's asking the universe to witness your courage. And the universe, in my experience, always says yes to that. Key takeaway from this section. Confidence is built one small coin at a time. Relationships are the soil where the most powerful asks take root. And in high-stakes moments, preparation, composure, and grace separate those who advance from those who stay stuck. These 3 chapters aren't just strategies. They're invitations to become the kind of person who asks not from desperation, but from strength, depth, and genuine connection. Chapter 13, The Lion and the Lamb. There's an old parable about a lion who ruled the savannah with terrifying roars and powerful strides. Every creature feared the lion. Every creature obeyed. But the lion was lonely, because fear doesn't build friendships, it builds fences. Then there was a lamb who lived at the edge of a meadow. The lamb was gentle, kind, approachable. Every creature loved the lamb, but no one took the lamb seriously, because kindness without backbone becomes invisibility. Now imagine an animal that carries both, the lion's courage and the lamb's grace, the strength to roar and the wisdom to whisper, the boldness to charge forward and the humility to bow when the moment calls for it. That animal doesn't exist in nature, but it can exist in you. And when it does, you become the most compelling kind of asker the world has ever seen: boldness and humility. Most people treat these as opposites, as if you have to choose one and sacrifice the other, as if being bold means being aggressive, entitled, or tone-deaf, as if being humble means being meek, passive, or invisible. But the truth is far more nuanced and far more powerful. Boldness without humility is arrogance. It demands. It bulldozes. It wins short-term battles, but loses long-term wars. People may comply, but they won't respect. They may give you what you want today, but they'll close their doors tomorrow. Humility without boldness is silence dressed in virtue. It waits, it defers, it hopes, and it dies with a heart full of unspoken words and unfulfilled potential, having mistaken passivity for politeness and shrinking for grace. But when you hold both, when you can look someone in the eye and say, "I believe deeply in what I'm asking for, and I completely respect your right to say no," something extraordinary happens. You create a space where people don't feel pressured, but they feel moved. They don't feel cornered, but they feel invited. They don't feel obligated, but they feel inspired. This is the sweet spot, the place where asking becomes magnetic. So how do you develop this balance? Boldness is built through preparation. When you've done the work, when you know your value, when you've clarified your ask and understand why it matters, you don't need to fake confidence. It's already there, radiating quietly from the foundation you've built. Bold asking isn't about volume, it's about conviction. It's the steady voice that says, "This matters, and here's why," without needing to shout. Humility is built through listening, through genuinely caring about the other person's perspective, not as a tactic, but as a value. Through remembering that no matter how brilliant your ask is, the other person has their own priorities, their own pressures, their own story. Humility doesn't diminish your ask. It dignifies it. It says, "I'm confident enough to ask and secure enough to accept whatever answer comes." Let me paint the contrast with a practical example. Imagine two people interviewing for the same position. The first walks in and immediately starts listing accomplishments. "I'm the best candidate. I've done X, Y, and Z. You'd be lucky to have me." Bold? Sure. But the energy is suffocating. There's no room for dialogue, no acknowledgement that the interviewer might have their own vision for the role, no humility to suggest that earning the position is a two-way conversation. The second walks in with equal confidence, but a different energy. "I'm genuinely excited about this role because it aligns with where I've been building my skills over the past several years. I've led projects that produced meaningful results, and I'd love to share the specifics. But I'm also curious about your vision for this position, because I want to make sure my contribution would genuinely serve what you're building." Same confidence. But the second version creates partnership rather than performance. It says, "I'm strong, and I'm also here to listen." That combination is irresistible. Here's a practical exercise for developing this balance. Before every significant ask, write 2 sentences. The first sentence captures your boldness, why you believe in this ask, what makes it worth pursuing, why you're the right person to make it. The second sentence captures your humility, how you respect the other person's choice, what you're willing to learn from the exchange, how you'll handle a no with grace. When both sentences feel true, you're ready. Boldness says, "Why not me?" Humility says, "I'll earn it." Boldness opens the door. Humility makes sure it stays open. Boldness reaches for the stars. Humility plants its feet firmly on the ground. You need both hands to build anything worth building. Chapter 14. The Daily Practice of Reaching. Let me ask you a question that might seem simple, but carries more weight than it appears. What did you ask for today? Not yesterday? Not last week? Today. If you can't answer that question, something important is missing from your life. Not a skill, not a tool, a habit. Because asking is not something you do once and graduate from. It's not a chapter you complete and move on. It's a daily practice, as essential as eating, as necessary as sleep, as fundamental as breathing. The moment you stop asking is the moment your world begins to shrink. Think about it this way. Your body doesn't stay fit from one workout you did 3 years ago. Your mind doesn't stay sharp from one book you read in college. Your relationships don't stay strong from one conversation you had last summer. Everything valuable in life requires ongoing practice, consistent attention, daily investment. Asking is no different. The people who live the biggest, richest, most opportunity-filled lives aren't the ones who made one spectacular ask at a pivotal moment. They're the ones who made asking a way of life. They ask every day for feedback, for introductions, for clarity, for support, for ideas, for connections, for chances they haven't earned yet, but are willing to grow into. They don't wait for some cosmic green light. They don't wait until they feel ready. They don't wait until the fear subsides. They ask in the middle of the fear. They ask on days when their confidence is low. They ask even when the last answer was no, especially when the last answer was no. So how do you turn asking into a daily habit instead of an occasional act of bravery? Start with a commitment so small it feels almost ridiculous. One ask per day. That's it. Not a life-changing ask, not a career-defining ask. Just one small intentional request woven into the fabric of your ordinary day. Ask a colleague, "What's one thing I could do better?" Ask a friend, "Is there a book that changed the way you think about your career?" Ask your partner, "What's one thing I could do this week to make your life easier?" Ask a stranger, "Would you recommend this restaurant?" These aren't grand gestures, they're practice reps. And just like an athlete who trains every day, your asking muscle grows stronger, more responsive, more capable with every repetition. Here's a structure that works beautifully. Create what I call an asking rhythm. Each week, make at least one ask in 3 different categories. Category 1, growth asks. These are requests aimed at your own development, feedback on your work, access to a learning resource, a conversation with someone who's further along the path you're walking. Growth asks keep you evolving. Category 2, connection asks. These are requests designed to deepen relationships, an invitation for coffee, a question about someone's journey, an offer to collaborate. Connection asks expand your world. Category 3, courage asks. These are the asks that make your palms sweat just a little, asking for a raise, pitching an idea, reaching out to someone you admire but have never met. Courage asks stretch your boundaries and prove to you again and again that you're braver than you think. 3 asks a week across 3 categories. That's 12 meaningful asks per month. 144 per year. Imagine where you'll be in 12 months if you follow this rhythm. Imagine the opportunities you'll have created, the relationships you'll have built, the confidence you'll have accumulated. Now compare that to where you'll be if you do nothing, if you keep waiting, if you keep hoping, if you keep telling yourself you'll start asking tomorrow. Tomorrow is the most dangerous word in the vocabulary of someone who wants more from life, because tomorrow never comes. There's only today, and today is asking you a question right now. What are you going to ask for? Track your asks. I know this sounds mechanical, but there's power in documentation. Keep a simple journal, a note on your phone, a running list in a notebook. Write down what you asked, who you asked, and what happened. Over time, this record becomes a map of your growth. You'll see patterns. You'll notice which types of asks come easily and which still challenge you. You'll have tangible evidence that you're changing, progressing, expanding, and on the hard days, the days when doubt whispers that you're not cut out for this, you can open that record and see the truth written in your own hand. You've been asking. You've been growing. You've been showing up. The evidence is right there in front of you. Surround yourself with people who ask boldly. Habits are contagious. If you spend your time with people who settle, who complain but never act, who dream but never reach, you'll absorb that energy whether you want to or not. But if you surround yourself with people who ask with confidence, who pursue their goals with relentless clarity, who treat rejection as a minor inconvenience on the road to something great, their energy will infuse yours. Find your tribe of askers. They might be in your workplace, your community, your industry, or your circle of friends. If they don't exist yet, create the tribe yourself. Be the first one to start asking out loud and watch how others begin to follow. One final thought on making asking a lifelong practice. Be patient with yourself. There will be weeks where you ask boldly and feel unstoppable. There will be weeks where fear wins and you stay quiet. There will be days when you ask beautifully and hear yes, and days when you ask beautifully and hear nothing at all. None of that matters as much as the long arc, the trajectory, the direction you're moving over months and years and decades. As long as you keep coming back to the practice, as long as you keep dropping coins into the jar, the compound effect will do its work. Quietly, powerfully, inevitably. You don't have to be perfect at asking. You just have to be persistent. Chapter 15. The life that opens when you speak. We've traveled a long road together, from the invisible chains that keep us silent to the architecture of yes, from the alchemy of rejection to the compound effect of courage, from small sparks that ignite big fires to the balance of boldness and humility. Every chapter has been building toward this moment, this final truth that ties everything together. Asking is not just something you do, it's something you become. When you embrace the art of asking, you don't just change your results, you change your identity. You stop being the person who waits on the sidelines, hoping to be noticed, and you become the person who walks onto the field and plays. You stop being the person who whispers wishes into the void, and you become the person who speaks clearly, directly, and courageously to the world. And the world responds, not always with a yes, but always with something: information, connection, redirection, growth. The world is not indifferent to those who engage with it. It saves its indifference for those who stay silent. Think about the most meaningful moments in your life, the relationship that changed everything, the opportunity that opened a new chapter, the conversation that shifted your perspective forever. Chances are, somewhere in the origin story of each of those moments, someone asked a question. Someone opened their mouth and said words that could have been met with rejection, and instead they were met with possibility. That someone could have been you, and from this point forward, it will be. Here's what changes when you make asking a way of life. Your relationship with fear transforms. Fear doesn't disappear, and I would never promise you that it would. But it changes form. It stops being a wall and becomes a signpost. It stops telling you to retreat and starts telling you where the meaningful opportunities live. The things you fear asking for are almost always the things that matter most. Fear becomes your compass, pointing directly toward growth. Your self-worth deepens. Every time you ask, you affirm that your needs are valid, your dreams are worth pursuing, and your voice deserves to be heard. This isn't arrogance. It's the quiet, steady recognition that you are a full participant in your own life, not a spectator, not a bystander, not a footnote. Your relationships grow richer because you're no longer hiding behind assumptions, hoping people can read your mind. You're showing up with honesty and vulnerability, inviting others to do the same. And in that exchange, something magical happens. Trust deepens. Understanding expands. Connection becomes real instead of performative. Your opportunities multiply, not through luck or coincidence, but through the intentional act of making yourself visible. Every ask is a ripple in the water. You can never fully predict where those ripples will reach, whose attention they'll catch, what doors they'll quietly push open while you're not even looking. Your resilience becomes unshakable because you've faced rejection and survived, because you've heard no and kept going, because you've learned through lived experience that failure is not fatal and that the only permanent defeat is the decision to stop trying. I want to leave you with a scene. Imagine yourself 1 year from now. You've been practicing the art of asking consistently, courageously, patiently. You've made hundreds of asks, some small, some significant, some terrifying. You're sitting in a room you never thought you'd be in. Maybe it's an office that represents the career you always wanted. Maybe it's a kitchen table with someone who loves you in a way you once thought was beyond your reach. Maybe it's a stage where you're sharing your story with people who need to hear it. Maybe it's simply your own living room, but you're sitting in it differently now, with a sense of peace that comes from knowing you gave yourself permission to pursue the life you wanted. And someone asks you, "How did you get here?" You smile, because the answer is so simple it almost feels like a secret. I asked. That's it. That's the whole story. Not "I was lucky." Not "I was born with the right connections." Not "someone handed it to me." I asked. Two words that contain more power than any strategy, any technique, any formula ever could. You already have everything you need to begin. You have a voice. You have a desire. You have the capacity to feel fear and move through it anyway. You have the ability to be clear, to be kind, to be bold, and to be humble, all at the same time. The only question left is the one that started this entire journey. What are you going to ask for? Not tomorrow. Not when you feel ready. Not when the timing is perfect, or the fear is gone, or the stars align. Today, right now, in this breath. The world is waiting for your question. And somewhere out there, someone is waiting to say yes. All you have to do is ask.